So Jojo, we're just wrapping up our fifth podcast episode.
Number 5.
Number 5. You know, as we talked about starting this podcast many
meetings ago,
we were trying to figure out, like, what would it be? What would the podcast be? And I don't know that we still know what it will morph to.
But we know where it's going, and it's going in a good direction.
It is going in a good direction. I think one of my hopeful aspirations for the podcast is that we can have a platform that we can share our passion for hunting and fishing with the public. And I think for people to understand that, you know, the stereotypical manifestation of what a hunter fisher is, it's just not real, right? I mean, you know, there's negatives in every aspect of human interest, right? But I think if you look at what hunting and fishing is for the spirit of a human being and for the escape that it gives you from your everyday,
it's spiritual.
Yeah, in many ways it is spiritual. When we go hunting and fishing, we wake up in the morning early before the sun rises, and we go, you know, we come back to camp exhausted from the day's excursion. You really have, for me, I'm talking about for me now, I really have a moment of clarity in the things that is pure joy of how I would spend my day. You know, aside from spending time with your family and your kids and your wife and all that, like, obviously that's all an important part of it, right?
I get it. And it's not just you that experiences that. And for me in this podcast, it's easy to connect with people that have that same feeling.
Sure.
And as you mentioned, not everyone really understands what it's like. So I think an important part of getting this message out, sharing our stories and sharing stories of other people that have the same likes as we do.
Yeah.
I think it's just as important to capture the audience that have always wondered what it's like, or may have kind of questioned, what is it that they do? What kind of joy do they get out of hunting and fishing?
Yeah.
And then experiencing it for the first time? Because some of my friends, some of my colleagues that I've had conversations with, they've never been hunting and fishing.
Right.
But now some of the questions that they're asking, they want to go. They want to go, or it's like, hey, Jojo, you talked about wild game. You talked about what's the taste of deer. Well, what does it taste like?
Right.
And my response is, just wait.
That's right.
I'll make it happen.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we capture that audience and find new members of our community. I think that's important.
I think so. I think if hunting and fishing as a heritage, right? If you look at it as a heritage of a region, is going to survive, you've got to get young people, new people involved.
Yeah. Yep.
You got to expose them in the right way to it, so that it, like, this is a very natural thing. It's a natural thing for a human being to wake up early and exert themselves physically and go on a search, on a mission for bluefin tuna, on a mission for white-tailed deer or elk, to climb a mountain and camp out and experience, in many ways, is the deprivation, right? Like, to be deprived of the comforts of your everyday life so that you can rejuvenate yourself in the wilderness.
I think you brought up a good point, is how do we get the younger generation involved? Because we as hunters and fishermen, we already love what we do and we have that passion for it.
Right.
But what we can't do is be selfish with it. We've got to find better ways to grow the community.
Yeah.
And it's going to start with the younger generation.
100%.
We can't chance any generation skipped to not experience that.
Right.
Because if that takes place, then some of the things that are going to happen is that our access is going to be taken away. Our opportunity is going to be taken away. The whole landscape of hunting and fishing could diminish and then eventually be gone.
Sure.
So how do we kind of influence that younger generation, get every generation involved? And that's one of the things that I want us to try to help figure out. I mean, we're not going to be the ultimate solution, but what is it that we can do to play our role to involve that generation?
Yeah, I think that is the quintessential question. The quintessential question is, how can you be part of a positive component to exposing people, new people, to the great outdoors?
Yeah. And it's a battle because there's a lot of people that are against it. and they don't even know why they're against it.
Yeah.
They have no idea why they're against it. And it's up to us to kind of step up and kind of band together to basically say, hey, this isn't bad. This is, as you mentioned it, a part of the heritage, and it's spiritual.
To your point, I have heard more than once, like a little bit of pushback from family friends. Oh, why do you hunt those poor little animals, or why do you do this? And it's amazing to me how someone can focus on such a small part of what hunting and fishing is in the grand scheme of things, right? So how is a society supposed to preserve a habitat? You cannot have any fishery, any hunting in the mountains or in any geographic area without habitat. The biggest threat to a species is the habitat.
Yeah.
If you don't have an active advocate for the preservation of the habitat, then, I mean, people stick condos everywhere. You look at New York City or large cities in that scale, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have cities, but where does the wildlife live if you don't have habitat for them?
And I think that's one of those things that we've got to do a better job as the hunting and fishing community in regard to tying that together. What does conservation look like in terms of conservation and hunting and how they benefit each other?
Sure.
And where you talk about having that narrow vision, so many people out there that don't necessarily understand hunting and fishing or don't necessarily tie the two together to conservation.
Yep.
They have this narrow vision in terms of, oh, hunting just means that they're killing these little baby animals.
Sure.
That's not it at all. There's so many rules and regulations that are out there that keep the population alive and keep herds growing, keep fisheries moving and growing. That how do we do a better job as advocates for the sport that we love to get people to better understand that side of the story?
I think to your point, we have to invite them to come along. You can't be selfish with it. I love going on a morning hike and watching the sun come up.
It's beautiful.
I really do. And to be honest with you, most of the time I do it by myself because it's my moment of solitude. If you talk about what hunting and fishing are on a spiritual level, we were not designed to live our lives in a cubicle, talking on the phone, sitting in a chair. We were designed as a species to move and to be part of our natural environment. And I'm not saying I'm going to leave my house and go move in a tent and live somewhere feral. Okay. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, if you ask me, what is the value of going hunting and fishing for you, in addition to the heritage part, in addition to getting clean protein, in addition to enjoying the camaraderie of your friends, if you were to ask me what else other than that, I would say it is your communion, the time for you spiritually to come into communion with the beauty that the wilderness has to offer.
It's a relationship that needs to be taken care of for sure.
Yeah. And you need wild places. You need wild places, and you need to preserve the beautiful wild animals that live in those wild places.
And we also got to realize that we're lucky to live in this great nation of America that's done such a good job, more so than so many countries out there in the world, to kind of provide that opportunity for us to go do what we love. And what we have to realize is that sometimes those things are in a constant battle to be taken away.
Yeah.
So we've got to preserve that.
And we got to remember what the original leader of the conservation movement was: a hunter. Theodore Roosevelt passed into law some of the most protective, habitat protecting legislation of his time against a lot of pushback from many different sectors. So
I'd love to shake that hand. I'd love to shake that guy's hand.
Absolutely. So we got to remember, guys, when you're advocating when you're talking to somebody and you're trying to explain why you hunt and fish, be positive about it. Try and work in a little bit of the history that hunters and fishermen and sportsmen have in the conservation role of this great nation.
There you go.
Right on. Well, guys, this was a little bit behind the scenes of Jojo and I's motivation for doing this podcast. It's what keeps us away from our family a couple nights a week, every night, so we can get this, get some of this content done
With
for you.
approval.
With approval. So far, we've got the consent, but we need to show results. So if you haven't done so already, please make sure you like and subscribe. Any other closing thoughts about what we talked about?
No.
I think we said it well.
Yeah.
I think we said it well. Well, guys, till next time. Thanks.